Sony made its way onto the gaming scene by releasing classic games like Final Fantasy VII and Metal Gear Solid on the PS1. This early success led to the PS2 dominating the gaming landscape and standing as one of the best-selling consoles of all time. However, Sony's next consoles on the PS3 and the PSP would struggle a bit. The PSP specifically would have a hard time competing with the Nintendo DS, so instead chose to target the hardcore gamer on the go. I'm Will from Game Rant, and today we're talking about the 6 hardest PSP games published by Sony. Number 6. Jak and Daxter: The Lost Frontier. The Lost Frontier was the last game in the series and was released on the PS2 and PSP. This game was not created by Naughty Dog, who developed earlier entries in the series, but still managed to carry the spirit of its predecessors. The problems with this game start to emerge when looking at the PSP itself. Flying sections are a big part of this game, but suffer from the PSP's control setup and the awkward angle of the camera. This led to a lot of unfair deaths, which made this game far more difficult than it needed to be. Number 5. God of War: Chains of Olympus. The God of War franchise had a few forays into the portable world, and this game and its sequel, God of War: Ghost of Sparta, would later get console remasters. God of War, as a series, is known for its difficulty, which makes sense for Kratos and the brutal nature of the games. Chains of Olympus takes this difficulty to a new level, however, as the PSP's limitations rear their ugly head again. QuickTime events and puzzles were almost impossible with the tiny analog pad used for movement. Without precise movement, more than a few problems would begin to pop up. Number 4. Pursuit Force. Pursuit Force was an interesting game for its time. The player would control a police officer and would try to stop chases on different vehicles. The weapons would even lock automatically, meaning that the player wouldn't have to aim using the PSP controls. What makes this game so difficult is the very short duration of certain levels, which can throw a lot at the player at once. That, and again the limitations of the hardware, made this game a difficult ride. Number 3. Killzone Liberation. Killzone Liberation took the first-person shooter series and made it a third-person game with tactical elements. The game relies on a cover system to avoid enemy fire, which is a mechanic that games at the time couldn't do as well as today. Plus, the game was fairly difficult even on easier settings. The player was able to collect stronger equipment to aid in missions, but the missions to get that equipment were sometimes harder than the normal ones. Number 2. Siphon Filter: Logan's Shadow. Siphon Filter was a big deal on the PS1. This series offered a more grounded take on espionage compared to other titles like Metal Gear Solid. Siphon Filter would begin to fall short once it made its way onto the PSP though. Logan's Shadow tried to be more realistic in their approach to stealth gameplay, but as a result made the enemies perceptive to the point of frustration. While not the hardest game on this list, Logan's Shadow is anything but a cakewalk. Number 1. Patapon. Strategy games require players to pay attention to their and the enemy's movements in order to stay ahead and make the right calls. Rhythm games require the player to pay attention to the beat and carefully press the right inputs at the right time. Patapon combines those two into a whirlwind of chaos and music. Don't get me wrong, the idea is really cool and the visuals are great for the style. But if the player has a bad sense of rhythm, this game's difficulty is raised to new heights. Combined with how frantic fights can get, players will be panicking as they desperately try to remember inputs and think 2 steps ahead all at once. That was our list of the 6 hardest PSP games published by Sony. For more games and articles like this, remember to drop by GameRant.com. Thanks for watching, and we hope to see you next time.